All right, so we have a topic for tonight which is quite exciting, something which has confused or baffled Maharsha for centuries, and somewhat, you could say, modern research has been able to explain what Tosfos is actually getting at. So, in this week's parasha, we have the mitzvah of that you're not allowed to shecht, even though the Torah says oisoi, as I'll teach us, it means the mother. You're not allowed to shecht the mother and the baby animal on the same day. Now, there is a Gemara. This Gemara is in two places. One is in bracha daf lamed gimel, and the other is in Megillah daf chav hey. And over there, the Mishnah says that if a chazan says al kan sipu yagiu rachamecha, you fire him. Mishat kenoisoi, you shut him down. Talking about in the days before there's a fixed exact text for the siddur, and the person who went to daven for the Amud was somebody who was skilled at coming up with ways to talk to Hashem on behalf as an agent of the whole community. So there's certain things which are out of bounds, and if somebody said that, they were silenced. And one of the things is al kan sipu yagiu rachamecha. I'll just point something out over here because it seems like most people have been through this sugya, from what I've seen, seem to miss this point. Al kan sipu yagiu rachamecha is half a sentence. So, and it's referring to the mitzvah of shiluach hakan, the mitzvah to send away the mother bird. So the way most Mefarshim explain it, and this is the way the Rambam explains it, and everybody else, that we're talking here about a chazan who gets up there and he says, Hashem, just like you had compassion on the mother bird by commanding us to send away the mother bird before taking the egg, so too shall you have compassion upon us. That is the objectionable statement. There's another way to learn pshat, which I think might be according to one shitta in the Yerushalmi, and to me it's clear that Rashi and Brachas also learns like this. Rashi and Megillah learns like the Rambam. Rashi and Brachas learns like this. That you're not talking about a request. He's not making a request of Hashem that just like you had rachmanis on the bird, so too you should have rachmanis on us. You're talking about somebody who's extolling the virtues of Hashem. We praise Hashem as being great and mighty and kind and merciful, etc. So he's saying, look how merciful you are. You are so merciful that you even have compassion upon the bird in the nest of al kan sipu rachamecha. So that's another way of understanding the Mishnah. That's what we find objectionable. Now, what is objectionable about saying al kan sipu rachamecha? So the truth is that this is a window into a massive, massive rabbit hole of a topic. Both in the local and the micro, understanding what is the reasons, or what are the different approaches to the reasons of the mitzvah of shiluach hakan, and also more on the macro in general. What's our approach to doing mitzvahs? Why are we doing mitzvahs? Is it for the reason of the mitzvah? Is it just because we want to do what Hashem said? And again, it's a massive, massive, very fascinating topic, and perhaps it's coming up to Shavuos, Nasav and Ishma. Maybe it's apropos to do a class, will probably be more a series of class on the bigger topic. But tonight I just want to focus on one very small detail in the sugya, which I find absolutely fascinating. In the Gemara in Megillah, where the Gemara repeats this sugya, the Gemara adds in another example. The Mishnah said the example of al kan sipu yagiu rachamecha, that you had mercy on the nest of the mother bird. The Gemara adds another example. If the chazan, another thing that the chazan is not allowed to say is that you had compassion on the mother goat, that you shouldn't shech the mother goat or calf or the cow on the same day that you shech the child, so too you should have rachmanis. You should have rachmanis on us. It's interesting that the Mishnah doesn't say that, the Gemara adds it. But Bechlal, the Ramban in Parshas Kisei, the Ramban has Bechlal a shitta in Mishnah Torah, that all the mitzvahs that you find in the book of Devarim, in Mishnah Torah, that are not found earlier in Chumash, really they are found earlier. So the mitzvah of al kan sipu of shiluach hakan is found in Parshas Kisei, it's not found earlier. So says the Ramban, no, it is because it really al kan sipu and the oisei v'esbenoi are really one and the same. The Gemara over there says that oisei v'esbenoi, the mitzvah that you're not allowed to shech the mother and the child on the same day, is because it is objectionable for a chazan to say that. Why? So one of the reasons of the Gemara is, which this seems to be the reason that gets the most attention in the Mefarshim, is because you are attributing this mitzvah to Hashem's rachmanus, that Hashem has compassion on the animal, but really that's not the reason. Really, the reason is just because you're supposed to do what Hashem says, even without understanding. It's not because Hashem is having rachmanus on the bird. It's not for that. It's just so that you should listen to what Hashem says. Again, there's different variations of understanding what that means and how that's to be applied, which is for another time. Tosfos asks a question. Tosfos says, how could it be that you're insisting, that this Gemara is insisting, that the mitzvah not to shech the mother and the child on the same day is not because Hashem is showing compassion to the animal? I will show you a clear source that it is, that the reason for the mitzvah is because Hashem is having rachmanus on the animal. What is that source? The source is the Kiddushta of the Kalir Kashla Rebel Chanun. Al-Masha Yosad HaKalir B'Kiddushta Sha'onu Oimrim B'Yom Beis Shal Pesach Tzadku Oisei V'Esbenoi L'Sishchatu B'Yom Echad D'Mashma Sh'Ratzoloi Masha Kadosh Baruch Hu Chas Al Oisei V'Esbenoi V'Hueinei L'Gzeira. Okay, so Tosfos says like this. There is the piyyutim, the Kiddushta of Rebbe Elazar HaKalir, which we say on the second day of Pesach. By the way, that language of Tosfos is precise because the Kalir lived in Eretz Yisrael and he did not write anything to be said on the second day of Pesach because the second day of Pesach for him is Chol HaMoed. But there were things that he wrote to be said on the first day of Pesach that we say on the second day of Pesach. Now, so in the Kiddushta of the Kalir that we say on the second day of Pesach, over there it says that the reason for Oisei V'Esbenoi is Rachmanus. So how come the Gemara is so insistent that it's not? That's the question. I guess the question is on the Kalir. The Kalir says that it's because of that the reason is to have compassion on the mother or on the animal, yeah, and the Gemara is saying it's not because of that. Okay. That's what we need for purpose of tonight's discussion. So on this Tosfos, there's a Maharsha, and the Maharsha says, I don't know what you're talking about. That Kiddushta of Tzad Kodesh V'Esbenoi, it doesn't say anywhere that the reason is for Rachmanus. Doesn't say that in the piyyut. So right away, what's going on? Tosfos says that's what it says. Maharsha says it doesn't say that. The words of the Maharsha are, Ein Pirusha Mukhrach. The interpretation of Tosfos in the piyyut is not Mukhrach. In other words, there could be it's not. You could interpret it otherwise. V'ayin bepirush hamachsa. Also look in the commentary on the Machsa Shemefarash L'Bidinacha that explains it in a different way. V'sulei midi and b'meila. That's not a problem. The Maharsha goes on to discuss the sugya, but the Maharsha says I don't see the relevance of this Kiddushta of Rebbe Elazar HaKalir. So what is going on over here? Now this Maharsha and this Tosfos have, as I mentioned, baffled commentators for centuries, literally. Many different Mefarshim suggest different Perushim in the Maharsha and in the Tosfos. Perhaps I'll mention one. The Kedushas Levi, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Badishev writes, I think it's in Parshas Balak, he says like this. If you look at the piyyut, it says, Tzadku oisoi v'esbenoi b'yom echad bal tishchatu. Keep the mitzvah not to shecht the context is Korban Pesach. So you have to shecht the animal for Korban Pesach. So even though it's a mitzvah to shecht the animal for Korban Pesach, we have to make sure that you're not shechting the mother and the bird, as the Gemara says. That's taken one of the times of the year where people had to pay extra attention to this mitzvah was on Erev Pesach when there were so many animals being shechted. And then the next line is מחשבותיך לרחמנו. Your thoughts are to have compassion on us. So, if I understand the Kedushas Levi correctly, what he's saying is that Tosfos understands this to mean מחשבותיך לרחמנו, that the purpose, your thoughts, meaning Hashem's thoughts, Hashem's reasoning behind this mitzvah is l'rachamenu, is for the inyan of Rachmanus, something along those lines. And Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says a fascinating chat, sort of to answer to it. So he says, no, the reason, really what מחשבותיך לרחמנו means is the other way around. Hashem doesn't need us. If Hashem's trying to have compassion on the bird or whatever, he doesn't need us. Hashem could figure out how to, he'll make sure you don't. If Hashem is here to protect the animals, so obviously according to the approach of Chassidus, that there's hashgacha pratis even on animals, so Hashem will make sure that the mother and the child don't end up being able to be shechted on the same day. He doesn't need to give us a mitzvah for that. The purpose of the mitzvah is so that we, through fulfilling this mitzvah, should be ma'orer HaKadosh Baruch Hu's rachmanus upon us. So we have rachmanus on the animal, and that makes us become merciful people, and that in turn arouses Hashem's rachmanus, mercy on us, and that's what Mahshevosech lirachmenu means. And b'meila, Tosfos understood as if the piyyutim is saying that the purpose of the mitzvah is because Hashem is having rachmanus on the animal, but really it's in order so that Hashem should have rachmanus on us. Shmak pshat, fine. The Maharsha says, the Pirush HaMachzor says otherwise. So I asked, there's a Yid in London called Reb Chaim Yisrael Tesla, who's a big expert on these things, and I asked him which Pirush HaMachzor the Maharsha had. He told me most likely Hadras Kodesh. I looked up in Hadras Kodesh, and you see, he doesn't really say anything explicitly. He doesn't say that it's because of Rachmanus. He says Mahshbusech lirachmenu is a new sentence. Whatever it is, we're not going to get too into all of those details right now. So what's going on over here? So, like I said, it's in some way you could say recent scholarship has been able to teach us, to explain to us the answer of what's actually going on over here. Let's go back to Sefer Chassidim. In Sefer Chassidim it says, in Siman Reish Nun Vav, that V'shama hachacham shehayu svivav oimim hakrovetz b'meshech v'apsukim hayu memaharim. So the wise person, I don't know if we know who this is talking about, but the Chacham, maybe means HaChacham, the Rav, whatever, he heard that people were saying the Krovetz slowly, with a tune, and the Psukim they were rushing. So there's the Kroiva, and there's the Psukim. And the Kroiva they were saying slowly, and the Psukim they were rushing. And Amar lahem, and he said to them, no, ha-psukim, those Psukim that you're rushing through them, heim yusayid ha-Krovetz, those are the basis for the Kroiva, Shemehem nisyastu, which is based upon, in other words, the kroiva is based upon those psukim. And kshem shatem menagdim as a krovetz b'meshech, just like you should say the krovetz, you sing it slowly, so too kach ta'aseh psukim, you should say the psukim slowly. So again, krovetz, Tosfos used the word kedushtא. A general kroiva is a singular, krovetz is the plural. It refers to piyyutim that are said in Chazaras Hashatz of Shemona Esrei. And specifically, Kiddushta is a type of kroiva that's said in Shachris, and it's split basically into three main parts. The Megin that's said in the first bracha, the Mechaya that's said in the second bracha, and the Kiddushta which is said in the third bracha leading up into the Kedusha. Now, once upon a time, this was very common. Nowadays, certainly this is true of Chabad, but it's true of many kiddushas also outside of Chabad, that we only say Kedushtas on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur. But it used to be common to say them on all Yomim Tovim, and right now here in question we're referring to the Kiddushta that was said in France on the second day Pesach. So what the Sefer Chassidim is saying over here is that a Kiddushta comprises of two parts. A kroiva comprises of two parts. There's the kroiva itself, which is the piyyut element of it, which is a poem, which is usually very cryptic and very sort of riddled with poetry and based on but it's based on psukim and based on extrapolating and the midrashim on those psukim. And you say the psukim and you say the kroiva. So the chacham who the Sefer Chassidim is referring to, he saw people that were saying the psukim quickly as if, okay, whatever, the psukim, that's boring, we'll get on with it fast. And the kroiva itself, that was more interesting. In those days, I think there were probably many more people who were interested in the poetry of it. So, that people sang, and there were probably nice tunes or the nice nusach to say it in. And the chacham in the Sefer Chassidim is telling people that it's not okay. The psukim are just as important, if not more important, and you have to say them slowly and pay attention to them as well. Now, this Sefer Chassidim is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. The Magen Avraham brings it down in the beginning of Siman Samech, and the Maharsha says that this is relevant practically. That when you say slichas, you all have to say the psukim slowly. What's slichas got to do with anything? Because the same is true of slichas. That slichas also are built, there's the poems of the slichas, but they are associated with pasukim. And again, the Maharsha is observing that people usually just rush through the pasukim because the pasukim is perhaps the boring part of the slichas, and people sort of pay more attention to the poetic sections of the slichas. And the Maharsha is telling you that no, that this Sefer Chassidim is telling you to slow down and pay attention to the pasukim as well. So I'll just point out about the slichas because this is something that we are familiar with. We do say slichas in leading up to Rosh Hashana. So, for example, the first night of slichas, we say Matzah Shabbos slichas. The first piyyut that we say, that on slichus starts off with the words Ein mi yikra b'tzedek ish toiv nimshal k'chedek. There's nobody left who knows how to daven properly. Okay, that's the theme of the first piyyut that we say. A few lines before that, you have the pasukim upon which that is based. The pasukim start off with Avad chasid min haaretz ein kalir b'shimcha b'soyer b'tzedek la'achzik bach. Again, pasukim, which are really the same idea, that we no longer have people who know how to daven properly in the same way that the Nevi'im or David HaMelech or whatever. Okay, so there you go. You have pasukim followed by a piyyut. Now, I should point out the interesting thing that the truth is that all of the slichas are designed to say this way, but in Chabad there's a very strange way which doesn't seem to make any sense, and the Rebbe already points this out. So, for example, the first piyyut on the second day of slichas starts off with Im avinenu ravu lahagdil, if we have a lot of averos. So, how we're going to deal with averos? Do tshuva, Hashem should forgive us, etc. So, the pasukim that are there's different in minhag lita. That's the piyyut for the second day, and Chabad follow minhag lita when it comes to slichas. So, the pasukim upon which that piyyut is built is also pasukim that say the same thing. Again, talking about having a lot of averos, Hashem forgiving us, etc. In Chabad, we don't say those pasukim, and instead we say the same pasukim that we said yesterday on the first day, which has no shaykhs to that second piyyut. We say Avad chasid min haaretz every day, which again doesn't make any sense in the way the slichas are built. And if you look in the Chabad slichas in the back, there's a hara from the Rebbe where the Rebbe writes, Sarachion, why are we doing this? But I guess that's what we do because that's probably, because it says here, because that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe said to do. So, the Rebbe is saying that I don't understand why the Frierdiker Rebbe said to do it that way, but obviously the Rebbe is not going to change one iota from how his father-in-law said to do things. Now, let's turn for a moment to the Rosh Hashana Machzor. Because here, again, I'm sorry, I'm missing out one point. When it comes to the slichas, for the most part, we do say the psukim before the slichas, and again, in the Chabad Machzor, there's a little bit of an anomaly over there, but okay. When it comes to the piyyutim that the Sefer Chassidim is talking about in the Kroivus, so the Sefer Chassidim is saying everybody should be careful to say them and say them slowly with the tune. L'maisa, not only is the minhag not to say them slowly, the minhag is not to say them at all. And this minhag goes as far back as the Maharam Rothenberg. In the Tashbetz, he writes that the Maharam Rothenberg used to omit those psukim, and that the minhag of the Maharam Rothenberg spread, and people were not saying the psukim at all. And eventually, the psukim were omitted from the Machzorim. First, they were omitted that it just said one or two psukim, and it said etc. And by the time you're talking in the Shins, which is basically the lifetime of the Maharsha, these psukim were completely absent from the Machzorim. So if you open up, for example, I opened up two Machzorim which were around in Poland in the time of the Maharsha, the Magli Tzedek and the Hadrus Kodesh. In Hadrus Kodesh, those psukim are not there at all. In Magli Tzedek, they have two of the psukim without Nakudas and small Rashi script, v'chulu, just like, if you really squint, you can notice that there used to be psukim over there. Now, even though we don't say the psukim, understanding that we used to say the psukim, in other words, understanding that the piyyut is built upon psukim really helps you understand the piyyut in general. So for that, I want to turn to the first day of Rosh Hashana, Shachris, the first Kiddushta that we say in the whole year. Starts off with the words, As Chil Yom Pekuda. Perhaps it's somewhat familiar, perhaps those words ring a bell to you. Now, the way we say the piyyut is very strange, because what happens is there's one big paragraph, which goes from Aleph till Taf, and the Chazan finishes off this paragraph loud, and then there's another paragraph which is literally two lines. The first line we say quietly, and then again the Chazan finishes off loud, and then we say zechreno l'chaim, and then Baruch Hashem Magen Avram. So it's very strange. But why are we saying another two lines? Just finish it out. Yeah. What's going on is like this. You have the first the way the piyyut is built to say, okay, truth is you have to go back one step. Forget about poetry, forget about Rosh Hashana, any bracha that you ever say. any bracha besides the short brachas of shakal ne'bedvar, but a long bracha, any long bracha that you ever say is comprised of three parts. The Gemara says this about Havdalah, but the truth is, in halacha, it's true of every bracha. You have the main text of the bracha, which is the bulk of the bracha, and then you have the conclusion of the bracha. Let's talk about the first bracha of benching. So, no, let's talk about Havdalah. Let's talk about the example the Gemara gives. Yeah. So, what's the bracha itself? Is hamavdil ben kodesh l'choil ben l'choshech ben yisrael la'amim ben yom shlishi ma'asa. Yeah. So you're enumerating various things. That's the bulk of the bracha. The conclusion of the bracha is Baruch Atah Hashem Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil. There's one line in between the text of the bracha and the conclusion of the bracha, which is the Samukh the Ma'in HaChasima Samukh L'Chasima. So before you say Baruch Atah Hashem Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil, you paraphrase it and you say Ben Yisrael Ben Yom Shlishi Ma'asa. Ben Yom Shlishi Ma'asa. That's it. Yeah. Ben Yom Shlishi Ma'asa. Baruch Atah Hashem Hamavdil Ben Kodesh L'Choil. Hashem differentiates between the seventh day and the 6 days of the week. Baruch Atah Hashem differentiates between the sacred and the mundane. So, in other words, when Chazal instituted brachas, everything is very structured. They want us to talk to Hashem in a very structured way, in a respectful way. You could even say in a poetic way. So, every bracha has those three components, and that is, you might not pay attention to it, but if you, in other words, you might not notice it. But if you pay attention to it, it's very clear. Every bracha of Shemona Esrei is like that. Yeah, the brachas haftarah, every bracha is like that. So now, when you enter in a piyyut into the bracha, so you're messing up with the structure of the bracha, because the bracha has a structure and you're inserting a whole poem in the middle of the bracha. So how do we connect it all together? So the way the piyyut is built is like this. First, you have the you finish the text of the bracha. Before the Me'en HaChasima Samukh L'Chasima, you finish the main text of the bracha, and then you say the piyyut. After you say the piyyut, you say the pasukim upon which that piyyut is built. Okay? When you finish saying the pasukim, now your job is to get back to the end. You have to finish off the bracha. So you start saying another line. Now, another poetic feature is that the first word of the next line starts with the last word of the last line. It's called sharshur in Hebrew, but it means to link together. It's a very ancient feature. David HaMelech already does it in Tehillim with the last few chapters of Tehillim, which all start and end with Hallelujah. It's a very, very basic feature of almost all of the piyyutim, the kinnis, the machsa, etc., etc. So you're listing a whole bunch of pasukim. Now you need to say another two lines. You finished with the piyyut already. You've said the piyyut, you've said the pasukim, you said everything, but you need to get back into the bracha. So you're going to say another two lines that's going to link to the pasukim by starting the first word of that line is going to be the last word of the last pasuk that you said. And then you're going to say Me'en HaChasima Samukh L'Chasima. You're going to change the direction of the poem to sort of lead towards the end of the bracha. And then you finish the bracha. Okay? So now, this very same piyyut, which we just spoke about, that we say in Rosh Hashana, so it finishes off the first paragraph. Then you say all the pasukim. The last pasuk is Nedivei Amim Nasofu Amalekei Avram Kilelikim Agina Eretz Mo'in Nala. Okay, the last word is Nala. Now you get into the next paragraph, which is going to bring you to the end of the bracha. Nala Bedin Alois Betrua. So you're getting into that, and then you're going to change the theme now to be talking about Mogen Avraham, because you need to have a Samukh L'Chasima. So you say B'Mogin Asreim, the protector, the shielder of the friends or of the ancestors of the Avis, Baruch Atah Hashem Mogen Avraham. Okay, so that's the theme. That's the whole. Now the problem is that in addition to omitting the pasukim, so it just seems like two random, like a paragraph with two random lines added to it. We also don't say Samukh L'Chasima on Rosh Hashana because we interrupt with zachrenu l'chaim melech hafetz b'chaim. So the whole thing just loses, like the whole structure. It's such a structured piece of tefillah, but because of all this change, you skip the psukim and we add in zachrenu l'chaim. So the whole structure just seems to gets lost unless you know how to do it. Okay, now. There is a medrash. It's in a number of places. Here I'm reading it to you from the pasuk of lirchmeno. It's also in other places as well. I forget right now where. And the medrash is on the pasuk in Mishlei that says, "Yodea tzadik nefesh behemtoi, v'rachmei rishoyim achzori." The tzaddik knows the soul of the animal, and the wicked, the wicked are cruel, basically. Okay, so there's the tzaddik who is merciful on the animal, and there's the cruel one. Says the Medrash. Yodei tzaddik nefesh behemtoi. Who's the tzaddik who's merciful? Zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is Hashem. Why is he merciful? On the animal, nefesh behemtoi, because he says oisev es benoi. And who's the cruel one? The cruel one is Haman HaRasha, who said to kill the exact opposite. Not only was he going to kill, he was going to kill parents and children. Yeah, the lashon in the Medrash is Haman HaRasha d'chsibei lahashmid la'argul l'abed kol haYehudim. So that's what he means. Yeah, that Haman is the epitome of cruelty, that he's going to kill and wipe out the entire nation in one day. And Hashem tells you that even when it comes to animals, you don't kill the mother and the child on the same day. I apologize ahead of time. I'm going to go 2 or 3 minutes over here to finish the Inyan before marriage. Okay. So in Tov Reish Chav Ches, that's 1868, there was an individual by the name of Baber, Reb Shlomo Baber, and he published the Psikta Lirchmenu with his notes. This was always the standard edition. If you look in Sichos, it's always Psikta Medrash Baber. Okay, fine. So he says on this Medrash, he says that if you look in Piskei Tosfos, it says that the payat that says tzadku oisei v'esbenoi, to keep the mitzvah of oisei v'esbenoi, why does he use the word tzadku? Because he's alluding to this medrash of Yodei tzadik nefesh behemtoi. Now he says, Tosfos says that the Kalir says in his kedusha that the reason for this mitzvah is because of becoming rachmanos on the animal. It doesn't say that in the piyut. But it could be that Tosfos had a different girsa which did quote the pasuk of Yodei tzadik nefesh behemtoi. That was the suggestion that obviously the Maharsha, he says, didn't have this girsa, but probably Tosfos did have this girsa, and that's why Tosfos thinks that Tosfos has a different girsa in the piyut. Okay, so he's almost right. He's almost right, but now we know for sure, because now we have now already you could find Machzorim published that even though we don't say the pasuk, I mean we don't say this. Most kehillas don't say this piyut at all, but even those who do don't say these pasukim. But the pasukim in this piyut of Pesach that Tosfos is quoting, it starts off by saying the words Tosfos quotes are tzadku oisei v'esbenoi l'sishchatu, so it uses that word tzedek, but then it lists the pasukim, and the second pasuk that it lists is v'nemar kakosov. V'shoy yisei v'yisov esbenoi l'sishchatu b'yom echad. V'nemar yodei tzadik nefesh behemtoi v'rachmenu shoy machzori. So it's not just conjecture; it's actually explicit in the original piyut that it's based on this pasuk Yodei tzadik nefesh behemtoi. And obviously, as we've discussed in the past, the Kalir is taking for granted our familiarity with this medrash that explains that the pasuk Yodei tzadik nefesh behemtoi is referring to this mitzvah. And so that's what Tosfos means. Yodei tzadik nefesh behemtoi. It says over here, how could the Gemara say that oisei v'esbenoi is not because of rachmanos? It says over here clearly in the question, the way it says, how could the Kalir say that the reason is because of rachmanos? It's clear in the Gemara that's not for us. So what do you do with this tier? However, by the time, like we said, the Maharam Rothenberg already stopped saying the pasukim. By the time the Maharsha came around, even the printed Machzorim no longer had these piyyutim, and there you have all these generations, and the Yitzchak and the Shalem Meshiv, and etc., a whole list of Mefarshim were trying to sort of squeeze out of the piyyut without the pasukim. Where do you see that the reason is Rachmanis? But the Maharsha, none of them had these pasukim. But now that there are already new Machzorim that have restored the original text of the piyut, so it's clear what Tosfos is getting at, that this piyut, it does in fact say explicitly that the reason for the mitzvah of oisei v'esbenoi is to have rachmanos on the animal.